Hi, everyone. My name is Vicki Conley. I'm so pleased to be here with you today at the 2023 SAQA conference. I live in Ruidoso Downs, New Mexico, and I hope you will enjoy hearing how the national parks have inspired my art. I've recently retired after 42 years as a studio potter, making a living doing arts and crafts fairs and owning a gallery. In 2003, someone in the booth behind me knocked over one of my pieces of pottery and as compensation gave me a pattern for these little paper-pieced frogs. After I put it together, I had never quilted before and I was hooked. My love for the national parks began as a child with stories my dad told of his time in the parks. Growing up, we visited and camped at many of them. After a bear encounter in the campground at Crater Lake, my mom never camped again. However, I continued exploring with my children and grandchildren. On my first visit to Yellowstone, I was transfixed by the beautiful colors in the hot springs. The scientist in me wanted to know what made that orange crusty stuff. Thermophilic bacteria, of course. If I'd had the opportunity to go back in time, I would change my field of study from physiology to microbiology. Death Valley National Park is very stark with little flora and fauna. The beauty comes from the colorful and interesting rock formations, like the Golden Canyon. This is the largest national park in the lower 48 states and has the lowest point in North America, Badwater Basin at 282 feet below sea level. The Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge is a wintering area for sandhill cranes and snow geese. I wanted to capture the turmoil of the mass takeoff of the black and white geese in this abstract work. I improvisationally pieced black triangles onto small white squares, echoing the traditional flying geese block. But my true vision was for a wide format piece. Flying Geese 3 incorporates three-dimensional geese sewn onto the background to really give the feel of turmoil of takeoff. The cacophony of the honking is a sound to experience. Only the geese know what it means. Flying Geese 1 voice was done in reverse applique. When the SAQA call for entry textile posters was announced, I decided to do a piece in the style of these historic park posters commissioned by the WPA in the 1930s. They have a bold graphic style with text to entice Americans to visit our public lands. Of the 18 original posters, only 11 remain. I also wanted to reference this historic photo of the fathers of our national parks. Theodore Roosevelt enacted the Antiquities Act, and by the power of the pen could protect any land for conservation or historical significance. John Muir tirelessly promoted conservation of public lands through writing and speaking. Thus, my first park poster was created. It captures the beauty of Angel's Landing with a bold graphic style, being admired by my husband and his friend. I have incorporated silkscreen text that might inspire you to visit. The main part of the quilt is turned edge machine piece, and the gradation blue sky will become my signature style. Big Bend National Park is in South Texas, where the Rio Grande River forms a border between the United States and Mexico. I decided to put a silhouette in each piece, and I have replaced my husband Doug and his friend Dennis with javelinas. I was in awe when I first looked up at the beautiful ceiling in the Kiva at Aztec National Monument in northern New Mexico. I thought about how skilled the ancient people were to make this incredibly beautiful structure for their spiritual center. Immediately, I thought it would make an interesting pieced quilt. Sometimes the scene depicted doesn't have an intense blue sky like the caves of Carlsbad Caverns or the swamp of Congaree, or in the case of Saguaro, a sunset was appropriate. So by using other gradation fabrics, but the same fussy piecing technique, I have kept to the style of the series. About the time I started the Grand Canyon, I was having trouble with my silk screens not printing well. In both Grand Canyon and Wrangell St. Elias, I designed the lettering and the fabric behind it in Photoshop and had it printed at Spoonflower, then pieced that section onto the other part of the quilt. I usually use my own photos to design from, but sometimes I will grab a copyright-free image from Unsplash. I work them into a drawing in Procreate or Photoshop. I cut out the individual pieces and always audition them pinned to the design wall before sewing them together. I use Floriani Stitch and Wash fusible water-soluble stabilizer to piece with. The pieces are cut apart and fused to the fabric, the edges are turned with glue stick, and the pieces are zigzagged together. The stabilizer is left in and gives great body to the finished quilt. I hand-dyed the fabrics for the soft hills of the Great Smoky Mountains and highlighted the historic Mingus Mill in the foreground. This one of Olympic National Park is ready to be quilted and shows the towering sea stacks right off the coast of Washington. This is again Grand Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone, and this abstract technique starts with 9-inch pieced blocks. In this case, Ohio Star, but many other blocks would also work. Then they are cut up into 16 pieces each and arranged on the design wall to evoke the feeling of the park, and finally sewn together using a grid interfacing. I love the fun of blending the colors on the wall with small squares. Cutting up the pieced blocks allows for a more intricate pieced look, adds variety to the appearance of the piecing, enables me to create color and movement across the piece. Visiting Mount Rainier National Park at the peak of the wildflowers inspired this piece. I will leave you with this quote by John Muir. I only went out for a walk and finally concluded to stay out till sundown, for going out, I found, was really going in. Thank you so much to SAQA for including my lightning talk in this year's conference.